News, Kansas News Leader.
March is Women's History Month, and we are taking time here at 4 to recognize some of the women who've worked to build, lead, and care for our communities. Libby Rosen certainly fits the bill. She is Dean of the Baker University School of Nursing at Stormont Vail, and if you had a baby over the past several decades at Stormont, even if not, because you work with folks from other hospitals too, chances are you have met Dr. Libby Rosen, PhD, RN, everything. Where did this come from, Libby? When did you realize you were born to care?
Really, when I was in the 5th grade, my cat gave birth to kittens and she wouldn't let me leave her side. And I learned about the art of labor support then. And I tell the students that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I have always loved working with babies and mothers and families as they go through the transition to parenthood.
What has been your mission as you work with moms? I mean, especially first-time moms have to be quite fearful.
Yep.
And nervous.
The International Childbirth Education Association has a motto that says freedom of choice based on knowledge of alternatives. So for me, my main goal has been to educate, to let people know what are the choices they have when they give birth, whether they are going to give birth at a birth center, at a hospital, at home, what would be the advantages, disadvantages, the risks, the benefits. Those are always things that people need to have, are choices.
When did you start your nursing career, if I may ask?
I started in 1974.
1974.
So 51 years ago.
I was a year old. How have you maybe seen attitudes change? Because I remember back, like myself, I think all of us, 5 kids in my family, we were all formula babies because that's just what it was back then.
Exactly.
And, you know, childbirth was something that, you know, the ladies went to the hospital, they stayed a week, and then they left and they maybe had this nice baby, but we didn't really talk about a lot.
Exactly.
How have you seen that change?
What has changed a lot. In fact, when I started in 1974 in labor and delivery, women still often went to sleep when the babies were born. So started out by teaching childbirth classes and just, again, having women feel more empowered and feel better about their bodies and their strength and their decisions, whether they chose to be awake, to be asleep back in those days, then later, whether they had an epidural or whether they had natural childbirth. Just knowing that they did have a say and an input into what was going to happen during this labor and birth time. Anytime we know more about something that we're going to be going through, the more relaxed and comfortable we can be with it. Now, childbirth is obviously not a totally relaxed, comfortable time, but it's a very doable thing. I often tell the students that if, you know, having a baby was not very doable, we wouldn't be here as a human species. So most of the time things go right. And if things don't go right, women also need some choices and decisions. And I've worked since 1990 in this community with pregnancy and infant loss support as well, because that's another time where you need to have choices into how you're going to handle the loss of your baby.
Both ends of the spectrum, how is bringing those discussions into the open so important? From the breastfeeding realm, I think back to how it's only been just recently where we had to have laws to ensure that women have a right to breastfeed anywhere they have a right to be.
Absolutely.
And even having these discussions about, you know, and then openly discussing things like infant loss. Has the change happened as we've seen perhaps a more diverse gender representation in hospital administration, that there's been more of a willingness to be more open about these?
That, and I think just having the conversation, just education. To me, the role of the nurse is to help patients to understand and to be educated. And so when I teach a breastfeeding basics class, that's another example. You know, nobody says to me, well, I'm thinking about breastfeeding or I'm thinking about formula feeding, but if it doesn't work, then I'll breastfeed. They always say, I'm thinking I want to breastfeed my baby, but if it doesn't work, I'll just give a bottle. We're much more comfortable with that. That's what we grew up with. Now that it is a little more public and open about the advantages of providing human milk for human babies, then you see people saying, well, I do want more information. And again, knowledge is power. So the more knowledge they have about what to do and what to expect, the easier it goes. And the breastfeeding follow-up clinic also helps to support people that Stormont offers.
Where do you see the strides that remain when it comes to women's health?
The strides really are just, again, in awareness, in education, and in doing self-care, taking more care of our own bodies. Women tend to still be the caregivers often and at their own expense. So knowing more about what they can do to be strong and to be healthy is vitally important, and being aware of their bodies.
The resources are there, and Libby is still one of those resources, so we appreciate you taking time to visit. Good to see you.
Good to
Thank
see you
so
too.
much.
Thank you.
We are going to take a look at that forecast and find out when a rain chance could be moving in next.